Right, good evening everyone. This time of year is a bit of a sort of transition period for those of us interested in astronomy. First of all, we've just had the spring equinox and the sun is now north of the celestial equator, moving further north to the summer solstice. And this means that the days are getting longer, which is great if you like observing the sun, but the nights are getting shorter, so if you like nighttime observing, it's a little bit less time. Allied to that, we've just gone into summertime, which skews everything, which means that if we want to do some nighttime observing, we've got to stay up a little bit later than we have over the last couple of months. But despite that, there's lots of interesting things to see over the next couple of months. Obviously, with the days getting long, there's more time to observe the sun, and the sun is becoming very, very active indeed. And this is a chart of solar activity. There's sunspot numbers, daily and monthly, provided by Director of the Solar Section Lynn Smith. And we can see that the activity is starting to go up into 2023. Radio observations have also provided some information that solar activity is going along. On the bottom, we've got activity from about 2005, and here up to 2023, we can see that sort of activity for flares is increasing. And this is an image of the sun taken by Peter Tickner. It's only a couple of days old. We can see there's plenty of sunspots on the disk, so it's well worth having a look whether you use a solar filter, full aperture filter, or some sort of solar projection device. One thing that's always amazed me, I don't do solar observing myself, is the sheer beauty of the images that amateurs take in different wavelengths, not only in white light, but in hydrogen alpha and in calcium light as well. And here we can see three images taken by Carl Bowen, all in different wavelengths. We've got on the left, we've got a white light image of an active region, the same region in hydrogen alpha light, and then in calcium light as well, all showing different features. Hydrogen alpha images, as you can see here by this image by Dave Smith, show a lot of features. We've got the sunspots, we've got filaments, and of course we've got lots of prominences as well. And that large prominence on the lower right is seen in much greater detail here. It's almost as if material is either coming up from the sun or dropping down from the prominence. So a lot of amateurs enjoy using hydrogen alpha filters, and over the next few months I'm sure there's going to be a lot of activity. But when the sun is active, there's a byproduct. We get increases in auroral activity. And over the last, certainly at the end of February, there was an auroral storm that was seen to the south of the UK. More recently, we've had an auroral storm on March the 23rd and the 24th. And this is a time-lapse video by Callum Potter up in Orkney. It's taken over about an hour or so, and you'll see a car come into the image at one point. And this shows you the sheer beauty of aurora with all the changing aspects of it. And this is a very fine video indeed, and you'll see a little bit of cloud coming into the image as well. Here's the car, and if you get a chance to see one of these things, they are a very spectacular sight. Observers in Scotland often see aurora, and this one was seen by other amateurs in Scotland. It's a nice image by an amateur called Alan Tuff, and we can see all the various colours in the aurora. Also in Scotland, Dennis Brzezinski took this very fine image of the aurora that night. You can see Cassiopeia upon the right, and Perseus over onto the left. But this auroral storm actually moved down to more southern latitudes, so we could see it in lower latitudes in England. And this one shows the colours of the aurora taken by Philip Jenkins in North Yorkshire. This storm was seen even further south. Here is one, got no details of the equipment used by Les Fry from Aberystwyth, and we can see the red coloration in the aurora. And then further south in Ilfracombe in South Devon, was seen by Ella Bryant. So it just shows this storm was visible quite first way down south in the UK. When the next storm will occur is nobody's guess, but it's worth looking out to see if there's any aurora around. And certainly for people in the far north of Scotland, they may, over the next couple of months, have problems with more extended twilight. But we never know what might happen. This shows the phase of the moon over the next couple of months. We've got a full moon in a few days' time on April the 6th. But two very interesting things. There's a new moon on April the 20th where there's a solar eclipse taking place. And then the following full moon, we've got a penumbral lunar eclipse. alas, neither are visible from the UK. But the hybrid solar eclipse is visible from in the Indian Ocean and Pacific north of Australia. And this is unusual at the extremities of the eclipse track. Only the umbra won't touch the Earth, so we actually only get an annular eclipse. As we get closer to the centre of the eclipse, marked by that dot, we get a total eclipse. And landfall, it covers various things, but it covers Australia. And I know Nick is going to go and see this, and is anybody else going from here? So it'd be interesting with the increase in solar activity, what sort of things we might see during totality, maybe more prominences, different types of corona, and so on.
All of 58 seconds.
Well, yeah, I was just going to point to say it's all 58 seconds. Not a lot of time to do things. There's also a number of lunar occultations taking place over the next couple of months. You can see further details in the BAA handbook. One quite bright one is on April the 10th, which is the moon occult Sigma Scorpio, and that should be relatively easy to see because it's quite a bright star. There's another interesting lunar occultation on May the 17th. And this is actually where the moon passes in front of Jupiter. John's been talking about Jupiter earlier on. However, this is going to be a very difficult one to see. The moon is a very narrow waning crescent, and the occultation takes place in daylight, and it's only 26 degrees away from the sun, which raises all sorts of implications. For safety implications, I think if you want to try even attempt to see this thing, you really got to know what you're doing. You don't want to get the sunlight getting into the telescope where you could risk damaging equipment or your eyesight. What is further about this occultation, it's not visible from all the way around the UK. If you look on this chart, these are grazing occultations taken from the BAA handbook. And number 4 cuts through the north part of England into Scotland. If we were trying to attempt to observe this event from Edinburgh, we'd see an occultation. On that track where it shows number 4, you'd see a grazing occultation. Jupiter would be partially or not completely covered by the moon. And south of that will be no occultation at all. Whether anybody will even attempt to do this, I don't know, but it's a very difficult observation to make, and you've got to know what you're doing because, again, as I said, this takes place only about 20-odd degrees or so from the sun. The most dominant planet in the sky at the moment presently is Venus. You can't miss it. You can see it very bright just after sunset. And also, apart from Venus, we've got Mercury appearing as well in April. It reaches greatest elongation on April the 11th, so it's a good time to observe this. And this is a chart showing the position of Venus and Mercury on that night. Hopefully we won't have a tree in the way. At this particular time, it will be about 10 or 12 degrees north of the west cardinal point and about 10 or 12 degrees altitude. So it's a good time if you've never seen Mercury to try and find Mercury. Obviously, don't go looking when the sun's up, but it'd be a good thing for object for binoculars as well. It has another elongation, a morning elongation on May the 29th. But this is very unfavourable. Although the elongation from the sun is larger than the one on April 11th, because the ecliptic is very shallow to the horizon, Mercury won't be above the horizon much before the sun rises. We also can see it's near Jupiter at the time, and Jupiter will be coming back into the sky sort of June, July time, so observations that John's already mentioned would be able to make that as well. Venus, as I said, it's the most prominent object in the sky at the present moment. It's approaching its eastern elongation in early June, so it's still not a very large object in terms of angular diameter. Over the next couple of months, it will increase in size from about 14 arc seconds across to just over 20 arc seconds. With a small telescope, you should be able to see the phase. On the left, we've got an image by David, which is in the infrared, and on the right, we've got an image by Luigi Moroni, who's a very good planetary imager. And you can see in the ultraviolet image, we're starting to see some structural cloud detail on the upper clouds. So it's well worth having a look over the next couple of months to look at Venus. Mars is still visible in the sky. It's moving through Gemini. And it's actually quite small. It was opposition in December where it was over about 17 or 18 arc seconds across. It's now shrunk down, and over the next couple of months it'll shrink down from about 6 arc seconds to about 5 arc seconds. But with suitable equipment, some features are still visible. And here is a nice set of images taken relatively recently on March 20th by Vincenzo della Vecchia in Italy. And we can see the south is at the top, north is at the bottom. And as Richard has rightly pointed out, there's some equatorial clouds visible in some of the images, and also some of the dark markings and features on both poles. So again, it might be worth, with very small telescopes, you might be able to discern a disk, I don't know. It's still worth having a look. John has already mentioned Jupiter. He showed some of these images a little bit earlier on, images taken by amateurs. Sadly, it's its solar conjunction on April 11th, the same day as the elongation of Mercury. As we saw earlier on, Jupiter will start to come into the morning sky in sort of the end of May, beginning of June. And it'll be interesting to see, with observations made out, if some of these features that John has described are still there again. For the outer 3 planets, Saturn, Uranus and Neptune, are not really visible at the present moment. Saturn went through solar conjunction on February 6th, and by about towards the end of April, begin to be visible in the morning sky again. It's moving further north, up the ecliptic, which is good. The ring inclination will be a lot less as it's been over the last few years, and it'll be down to about 8 degrees relative to the Sun and the Earth. Uranus is near Venus at the present moment, but it was in solar conjunction on May the 9th, and Neptune is just past solar conjunction on March the 15th. So we'll be able to see these planets more readily in the summer, autumn and winter again. But on Uranus, some of you remember on one of the sky notes about this time last year, an image was shown taken by Martin Lewis. And Martin has got a very large telescope. It's a 444mm Newtonian. And in this sort of animation, we've got what he thinks he's detected the rings, and I think most people think that he's detected the brightest ring on Uranus. There, it's not working, you can see a prediction, that solid line is prediction, and when that disappears, you can see Martin's observations. So he's almost certainly captured this ring. Recently, he's undertaken some additional processing of this image, and here we can see the raw processed image, and you can see the ring there, and that is the prediction of where the ring should be. So I think Martin has done a really excellent observation, actually detecting the brightest ring on Uranus. We've seen this picture earlier in John's talk of the conjunction between Venus and Jupiter. I think this one by Grant Privet is very, very photogenic indeed. And from time to time, we get some of the planets come close together, or the moon appears close to one of the planets as well. And a few days ago, David captured this one where the sort of crescent moon was near Venus. And over the next couple of months, there's actually, some photogenic opportunities to capture some of the planets closer together or near some of the clusters. Again, on April 11th, everything seems to be happening on April 11th, Venus will be passing fairly close to the Pleiades. That would be a nice photogenic opportunity if you've got a camera or binoculars. The moon and Mars will be fairly close on April 21st. And then from May the 23rd to the May 24th, we've got the moon, Venus and Mars fairly close together as well. There are some other conjunctions between the moon and Jupiter, moon and Mercury or Saturn, but these are all in heavy twilight, so I think they'd be rather difficult to see. There are some dwarf planets and asteroids around visible as well. Ceres is in the constellation of Comet, and it's about magnitude 7. And if you look in the BAA handbook, you'll have more details to predict the positions of things to be able to find, and it should be visible, easily visible in binoculars. A little bit more challenging is an asteroid called Iris. That will be on the Virgo Libra border, and it's about magnitude 9.6, so maybe a small and medium telescope will be able to see this as well. Comets, well, we've been blessed by Comet 22E3 over the last few months. I think I'm correct in saying that it's now south
It's still visible from here, but it's
low down. It's very low down.
and it's
yeah.
it's faded along.
Yeah, but this is a nice image by Peter Carson from his observatory in Spain, and we can see the double tail of this comet. So it's been really good, but I think there's nothing else going on in the comet world at the present moment, really. Nothing predicted. No, okay. We have a couple of meteor showers coming up over the next couple of months as well. We've got the Lyrids, which occur from April the 14th to the 30th, and the maximum is on April the 23rd. The radiant is not too far away from the nice bright star Vega, and maybe if you get very clear skies, we may be able to go up to about 15 metres an hour or so, maybe a bit less. The good thing about this, conditions are very favourable because the moon is only a couple of days old at the time of maximum and was set out of the way before the skies get really dark. The other meteor shower is the Eta Aquarids, and this is quite an extended shower. It lasts from April into the end of May, and the maximum is around about May 5th to the 7th. Two things are not favourable for this. First of all, the radiant will be low down in the morning sky, you may have to pass at twilight, and also around the time of maximum there's full moon. But certainly probably the best shower to look at over the next couple of months is the Lyrids. Let's have a look at the night sky over the next couple of months. This shows the night sky on April 1st, about 22 hours UT or 23 hours BST. And we've got the moon there. The winter constellations of Orion are starting to set out the way. And really we've got the Plough, there's a major overhead, and all the spring constellations of Leo and Virgo and so on. And the Milky Way is out of the way as well. So this particular area of the sky is where we start to see galaxies, and there's a lot of galaxies around to have a look at. By the end of May, things have switched down a little bit. The spring constellations have moved into the western sky, and we're now starting to see some of the summer constellations coming in as well. Sort of Vega, we've got Lyra, Cygnus, and so on. As I said, there's a lot of galaxies to have a look at. With the Pleiades really out of the way, probably the most prominent open cluster we can see is M44. And this is a really nice image taken by Ivan Walton. This is a cluster that you can see with the naked eye if conditions are good. And certainly it's a nice cluster to see with binoculars as well. For the galaxies, I must confess I'm not a deep sky observer, but personally two of my favourite galaxy objects are M81 and M82. And these will be virtually overhead over the next couple of months with Ursa Major being overhead. And these are two nice images taken by Kyle Hansen. The two separate images, which I've tried to put in the correct orientation. We've got M81 on the left and M82, this spindly starburst galaxy, on the right. And if conditions are good, you should be able to pick these up with binoculars. But certainly a small telescope will be able to show them as well. And certainly if you're into imaging, you can probably take some nice images like this. Another nice grouping of galaxies to be seen with relatively small telescopes are M65, M66, and the fainter NGC 3628. 65 is the linear galaxy on the right, 66 is the more spiral on the left, and the fainter NGC galaxy is up there. These can be seen, I don't know, 5-6 inch telescopes quite readily. And this picture is taken by Adam Rawlinson, but I don't think it will show up very well on the screen. But if you look on the BAA webpage of observations, if you have a look at this picture, and it's relatively recent, it sadly shows something that's rather a sign of the times, because there are satellite images crossing this in several places. In fact, on the notes that Adam put on there, he said 30% of the images we took were affected by satellites. It's a very, very sad state of affairs for all of us who are interested in astronomy. Certainly a Mr. Must be answerable for this. And finally, on the galaxies, it's down in sort of Corvus Virgo borders, the famous Sombrero galaxy. And this fine image was taken by Graham with Stanley. Was it yours? It is yours.
No, it's Telescope Live. The data's from Telescope.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you this question. This is yours, but was it taken remotely? Yeah.
Chile.
It is a really fine image indeed. So there are many, many Messier object galaxies to look through in the constellation Comet, in Ursa Major, in Virgo. So if you get dark skies, even if you can't see them obviously as well as this, it's well worth having a look. One problem, I suppose, that we get light pollution. We've got a lot more twilight over the next couple of months, and I suppose finding very faint deep sky objects may be problematic for some people. You can get around some of the light pollution with filters. The one thing to remember is a bit easier to observe, even if the light sky's a little bit polluted, are double stars. And in the spring, like in any time of the year, there are many, many double stars to look at. Obviously, the most famous one for spring would be Mizar and Alcor, nice double star in binoculars. Mizar itself is a double star in a small telescope. Alpha Canis-Venetici or Corcoroli. This looks very much like the famous double star Albiro. We have the two gammas in Leo and Virgo. These are fine double stars to have a look at. And if you have a look in any sort of star atlas, there's many, many double stars to have a look at. Some are visible in binoculars. Alpha Library is a fine object for small binoculars. It also has a nice proper name of Zubin El Ganubi. I'm not sure whether that's easy to pronounce if you're cold sober or have had a few beers, but it's still a nice object to look at. And certainly towards the end of the month, we've got the constellations of Lyra, with the famous double star, Epsilon Lyra, and in Cygnus, we've got Albiro. So if you look in some of the catalogues, even if you've got slightly light polluted skies, there are many, many double stars that you can see as well. There are many variable stars visible throughout the sky, but Jeremy Shears, director of the variable star section, has recommended two because they're easily visible in binoculars. The first one is RW Cephei, and on the BAA variable star section website, you'll be able to see finder charts and comparison star charts for observing these stars. This is a fine image taken by Mazin Yunus in Morocco and shows this Sharpless nebula here. But this is RW Cephei, a sort of reddish star. And over the last few years, here's a light curve going back to, I can't see on the end, 2019. This star often stays within about magnitude 6 to 7.3. But recently, it has started to show a fade where it's dipped down to about magnitude 7.7 or 7.8. And now it's contrary to its normal behaviour. Recent observations have shown that it's starting to brighten again, and there is speculation that this might have been caused by a dust outbreak around the star, very similar to what we saw with the fading of Betelgeuse a couple of years ago. Whether this is true or not, I'm not exactly sure. The other star that Jeremy has recommended for observers to use binoculars with is Chi Cygni. This is a very long period variable star. It varies from its magnitude range, it's quite enormous, magnitude 3 down to 14. So when it's at magnitude 3, it'd be visible to the naked eye. At magnitude 14, you need a larger telescope. As you can see here, it's starting to brighten now, and it's in with the range of binoculars. So over the next couple of months, it'll be an object that you can see with binoculars, an object which normally requires a larger telescope to see as well. So you'll be able to follow this into the spring and summer and see how it varies. And again, as I said, there'll be charts on the BAA variable star section website to enable you to find this. So I think it's just about time, David, so I'd like to finish, and thanks very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Mike. Fantastic rundown of what to expect in the next few months.